This presentation is the third and exciting instalment and conclusion to the Paris model. We will be looking at facilitation. Just as a reminder, there are three components of the Paris model. So, what's the best evidence? Are the teams ready and supportive of the change, of the context? And have you considered how you're going to deliver it? And the Paris framework sets out that the starting premise is that the successful implementation of research evidence is a function of the interplay between these three factors: the evidence to be implemented, how it fits with clinical, patient and local experience, the context in which implementation is to take place in terms of the culture, general receptiveness to new ideas, and the way in which the process is facilitated by whom and in what way. That is the Paris framework. If we remember, the Paris framework is focused on taking research findings and implementing them in practice as quickly as possible. And this third stage of facilitation is informed by the previous two stages. So thinking in terms of the nature of the evidence and awareness of where the quality of the evidence fits on the continuum of the quality of evidence will help you to understand the best way to implement it. Similarly, an appreciation of the context, I think, is particularly important as well to the facilitation choices. So if you've completed those assessment of the quality of the evidence and an assessment of the context, it then helps you to determine the best way to influence and implement that change. The authors of the model primarily focus on the type of action or facilitation that the individual is going to use that's appropriate for the evidence and the context into which they want to implement the improvement. And they argue that there's a continuum for facilitation which distinguishes between a doing for others role, so really undertaking functional tasks on the one side, and to enabling and empowering role, which is more developmental, which is about support, guidance to staff to understand and take control of the evidence and the improvement and deliver the change themselves. So they put out this fairly straightforward continuum. When we bring this all together, it creates a 2x2 matrix. So we can see on the vertical axis, we can see evidence, on the horizontal axis, context. So clearly where evidence is strong and the context is strong, receptive for change, that's our ideal situation. The remaining three quadrants then have an element of weakness associated with them. For example, where the context may be considered weak, your role as a facilitator is around not so much around the evidence and the change you want to make, but obviously focusing on how you build that team, how you develop that receptiveness and team capability to implement the change. If the team is strong, yet the evidence is weak, this creates a different set of challenge and obviously brings into questions of power between the members in terms of whose views dominate. And so you'll need to consider, maybe through your stakeholder analysis, the best way of approaching that context with the evidence of the change that you want to implement. Clearly, the fourth quadrant, where context and evidence are weak, is the most challenging environment in which to work in. As the model refers to, there may even be issues of safety and competence that come to the fore here. So it brings out much more a managerial approach to identifying and managing the issues that are at hand before you're able to move on to building that team in context to be able to deliver the change. So the framework isn't an answer to everything, but I find it a useful way of just stepping back from the environment into which I want to make the change and take stock of these three components. What is it that I'm trying to do, and how strong is that argument of the change I want to make? What's the context like? How do they behave? How do they work together? What's going on in that environment? And the combination of the two then help to inform me as to the best way of moving forward. Whereas the models such as the NHS Improvement Model, 1,000 Lives, and also the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, their improvement models are generally constrained and limited to the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. With this Associate Innovator Programme, we're trying to keep that improvement approach much more flexible. So having understood those initial questions about what you're trying to implement, the change you want to see, you've then got the flexibility to reflect on the context and the evidence to support the change and identify the most appropriate approach to facilitating that change, both in terms of the improvement methodology, but also understanding where your skills can be best applied.